Let us move on now to our fourth panelist speaker. I'm really excited to listen to him because I've heard a lot about him. I've been following him on Facebook and other social media. He also does not need much introduction because he's very famous. He's been going around the country speaking at different universities. He's a professor of sociology at Rice University. That is Dr. Craig Considine, who's a scholar, a global speaker, a media contributor, and a public intellectual. He has written many articles. He has also presented on behalf of many aspects and topics of Islam in many institutions and has written. Specifically, what intrigued me was when this pandemic broke out, coronavirus. He mentioned some of the prophetic traditions, which we call in Arabic hadith. And he mentioned about how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, 1400 years ago, mentioned about quarantine during the plague. So without further delay, I present to you Dr. Craig Considine, who will be speaking about Inspired by Muhammad, peace be upon him, for the next 15 minutes. So without further delay, over to you, Dr. Craig. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imam Ahmed. Greetings of peace to each and every one of you. Before I begin, a few thank yous are in order. Thank you to ICNA, the Islamic Circle of North America, for hosting this online event. And I'm sure that all of the panelists are sorry that we couldn't all meet in person and celebrate in person over this holiday weekend. Hopefully, God willing, we can meet one day in the future. Also, Reverend Thomas, Professor Hijazi, and Dr. Ahmad, thank you all so much for your inspiring words. I enjoyed listening. To all of the viewers, thank you as well. And of course, thanks be to God, for none of this would even be possible. I want to focus on a few things. And one of the terms that I'm going to explore has to do with one of the words in the title of this event, which is healing. And I want to take a little bit of a different approach to this term of healing by looking at how bravery can help us heal these wounds or these illnesses or these sicknesses that we as human beings, regardless of faith or background, have. So how can bravery heal? And even more in depth than that, how is love and bravery, especially love for humanity, how are these things interconnected and tied into two? So let's start with healing. Obviously, when we need to heal, this inevitably means that something is broken or something is sick. And this kind of sickness can be either in a person, inside their heart, their mind, their soul. It could be in a community. It could be in a nation. And it could even be throughout the world. So when Prophet Muhammad came in the 6th and the 7th century, he came and he emerged amidst a broken world, a society that was sick in Arabia specifically, but also in the surrounding regions and indeed the world. And how he responded not only shaped the society in which he grew up in, but it shaped the course of history itself. And he helped to heal by being brave. And he was brave because he loved humanity. So this kind of play on three words, healing, bravery, and love of humanity, is really the heart of this talk, my specific talk today, on why I'm inspired with the life and legacy of Muhammad. So let me start by offering you something that I offer to my students at Rice University. And at the beginning of the semester, I often tell them that really human beings can be broken down and understood by two themes or two categories. It's fear and it's love. And really, we can understand human civilization, we can understand the workings of God through this kind of binary. And I often give my students two acronyms that are linked to fear. So the first acronym is fear being false evidence appearing real. False evidence appearing real. A second acronym is forget everything and run. So fear, F-E-A-R, forget everything and run. But the one I stress to my students the most as a means to inspire and to empower them is face everything and rise. Face everything and rise. In other words, be brave. Be brave in the face of fear. Be brave in the face of indifference. Be brave in the face of indifference. Be brave in the face of the things that are not familiar to you. Be brave in the face of inhumanity, in the face of vulnerability. And perhaps more importantly, be brave even when you're tempted with merely being safe. And I know this is a difficult kind of product to sell. Be brave instead of being safe. And this is especially problematic today and challenging for people today because some people are threatened, attacked for the simple fact that they believe a certain way or that they look a certain way or they come from a certain cultural background. Some people just need safety, and I understand that. But I'm going to suggest here that Muhammad, the prophet, was pushing us, all of us, even a Christian like myself, he was pushing us to be courageous, to be brave. And this bravery helps us to heal. It doesn't necessarily put a Band-Aid on a wound. It makes surgery on that wound, and it helps to heal a given society. So I'm going to look at two examples from the life of Muhammad that I think are pertinent to our discussion on not only healing, but how we can find inspiration in the prophets. And the first theme is that of his perspective on racial equality. And we know, specifically through Muhammad's relationship with Bilal ibn Rabah, who, for those who may not be familiar, he was an Ethiopian slave that Muhammad grew quite close to. We know through this relationship that Muhammad was not merely not racist, that he was taking a more active approach against racism. So let me explain. One story relates that Muhammad actively defended Bilal when another companion, Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, was insulting Bilal, calling him the son of a black woman. And Muhammad, when he heard this, was really disturbed by what he was hearing. So he steps in and he tells al-Ghifari that really you are a man who still has the traits of ignorance in him. So Muhammad is actively pushing against one of his beloved companions, telling his companion, you're wrong here. It's not right to promote racism. And I'm going to actively defend Bilal against your accusations. And Muhammad, even pushing this a bit further, he referred to a state of ignorance, which in the Islamic tradition is referred to as jahiliyyah, which really is a kind of disease in itself. This state of ignorance before the time of Muhammad was one in which racism, tribalism, ethnocentrism were rife. And Muhammad was coming with the medicine to heal, which was racial equality. This inspires me as someone who loves Jesus, as someone who understands Jesus as being proactive, of being for humanity. I see Jesus and Muhammad's spirits linking on this matter of racial equality. We have another example, which is coming from Prophet Muhammad's farewell sermon in 632 at Mount Arafat. So this is his last hurrah in front of his people, the early Ummah. And he stated, as many of you know in the sermon, an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. A non-Arab has no superiority over an Arab. A white has no superiority over a black, and a black has no superiority over a white, except in piety and good action. So essentially what he's saying here is, let's look at people, and if we have to judge people, which we ideally shouldn't, let's not look at their ethnicity or their race or how they were born. Let's look at what's inside their heart, what's inside their mind. Let's look at the richness of their soul. Now, what I find beautiful about the farewell sermon is the fact that in 1963, one of the most important Christians and one of the most important Americans to ever walk the face of the earth, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., may God rest his soul, basically echoed something that mirrors the farewell sermon. In 1963, in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., Prophet Muhammad gave his I Have a Dream speech, which I will quote. Dr. King says, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." A beautiful way of aligning not only Islamic values and Christian values, but also pushing back against this binary thinking that Islamic civilization and Western civilization or America are somehow fundamentally incompatible. What is clear in both Dr. King and Prophet Muhammad's teachings is an emphasis on one's morals and one's ethics and good action, much more so than race. So what does this have to do with bravery? One of the key topics that I'm focusing on today. And what does this have to do with this idea of Muhammad being something beyond something that's merely not racist? As I mentioned, he's not racist. We know that. We know that through the farewell sermon in his relationships. But Muhammad was brave in the sense that he was an anti-racist. There's a difference between non-racism and anti-racism. Non-racism simply means you don't have racist views. Anti-racism means you are taking measures to actively dismantle the racism where you see it. So Muhammad not only recognizes the illness, he's coming up with the cure, the medicine for that illness to help heal. And I often think how easy it would have been for Muhammad to have dropped this idea of racial equality from his message, from his teaching. How promoting racism, if he were to take that route, would have been looked upon favorably by his opponents. But Muhammad refused to give in to something that was immoral, something like racism. So he took a very strong stand. He was brave in this way. He was not keeping it safe. He was doing something much more than that. And to that, I find inspiration. And the second story, if I can get this across in a couple minutes, has to do with one of the first gatherings in history between Christians and Muslims. And for those who are not familiar, this has to do with the delegation from Najran, a Christian delegation of Najran, visiting Prophet Muhammad's masjid in 631 in Medina. So at the time, Muhammad was writing letters introducing himself as a prophet, as a world leader, as a judge, a politician, a statesman, and so on and so forth. He invites the Christians to come to his masjid. They come to his masjid. Inside, they have a long interfaith dialogue on Christology, the nature of Jesus, and other things pertaining to the intersection of Islam and Christianity. And the Islamic sources, the authentic sources, tell us that the two sides, the Christians and Muslims, did not agree on everything, especially on the nature of Jesus. And I suppose in many ways this is okay. I mean, we're human beings. We're not going to agree on everything. That's impossible, and that's not part of God's plan. But the beauty and the inspiration of the story comes when it's time for the Christians to go pray. They start leaving the masjid, and instead of letting them go pray outside of a house of God, Muhammad stops them and says, "Why are you leaving? You're already in a house of God. Use our space to pray to the Almighty." This is a beautiful act of humanity, a beautiful way of potentially healing divides, a beautiful way of building trust between the communities. And just as we had a difference between non-racism and anti-racism, with this story of the Christians of Najran, we have a distinction between religious tolerance and religious pluralism. Muhammad was being religiously tolerant by welcoming the Christians into his masjid, but he was engaging in religious pluralism, or this energetic engagement with religious diversity, by saying, "My home is your home. This is a house of God. We worship the same God. So be at peace here. That, my friends, is, to me, that's bravery. Religious tolerance is being safe. It's not ruffling feathers. It's going with the status quo. Muhammad was breaking that. He was giving us something new, something fresh, or let me say, giving us something that we needed to be refreshed upon. It's a beautiful, beautiful message, and it's a beautiful teaching. Okay, so let me wrap up. I could talk about the story forever, as I'm really passionate about it. But let me say this, brothers and sisters, not only in faith, but also in humanity. There's no doubt that we live in anxious and challenging times. They were difficult before this pandemic has hit. They're even more challenging now for a variety of reasons, which I think is obvious, which are obvious to everyone. Ours is the kind of time where it's so easy, especially during a pandemic, to isolate, to hunker down, to forget all of the dramas and the hardships, and to just play it safe. It is so easy to just play it safe. And some of us even play it very safe. And fear does that to us. Fear makes us hunker down, isolate ourselves, stay safe. It paralyzes us. Fear paralyzes us. It stunts our growth, both individually and collectively. Fear keeps us from taking the direct kind of action that can bring us more peace and stability. And this is the kind of action that both Muhammad and Jesus were commanding us to do. Don't just condemn racism when you see it, or don't just condemn religious intolerance when you see it. Take active measures to combat it. So what is needed today is a kind of bravery that does not rely on fear. It's the type of bravery that commands us to love. And that is what God is teaching us. So what we need, again, a kind of bravery that shows a willingness to build bridges through action, even unpopular or uncomfortable action, like Muhammad took, amidst all this great diversity and uncertainty around us. We must do what is right, what is loving, instead of what is easy and self-fulfilling. This is the best way to heal, to love one's neighbor as we love ourselves. And it is for these reasons that I've outlined that I'm greatly inspired by the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Craig Considine. Amazing. I really enjoyed the acronym, FEAR. Never thought about that. Amazing way of substituting those letters. Forget everything and rise. That's fear. So brothers and sisters, like Dr. Craig said, let's forget everything and rise. And the other one that he said was also very beautiful about being brave in terms of that, which is face everything and rise. So I'm sorry, let me correct. Forget everything and run, and face everything and rise. Rise above the occasion, rise above the hatred. And the beautiful examples he quoted from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, about the farewell khutbah and connecting it with Dr. King speech in Washington, D.C. Amazing. Thank you so much. Again, I want to welcome those.